It begins in silence, a room dimly lit by the fading glow of evening. Outside, the streets of Rome stir with whispers, the scent of iron and fear drifting through the air. Inside, an old man sits in stillness. His hands are calm, folded in his lap, though he knows that soon those same hands will be asked to carry out his own death. He listens to the quiet, to the rhythm of his breath, steady and deliberate, like a heartbeat against eternity. He knows what is coming, and yet he does not flinch. This is Lucius Annaeus Seneca, philosopher, statesman, and teacher of emperors. He has known luxury and exile, praise and condemnation, and now in the final hour of his life, he faces the ultimate test of everything he has taught, the philosophy of calm amid chaos, of mastery over the only thing a man truly owns, his mind. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Now, as the soldiers of Nero's guard wait outside his door, he must decide whether those words were merely philosophy or truth. The air is heavy with finality, but Seneca smiles. Because to a Stoic, the end is not an enemy. It is simply another moment in accordance with nature. He has spent his entire life preparing for this one. The Stoic endures what others run from. Long before this night, Seneca was not yet the man of serene wisdom we imagine. He was young, ambitious, caught in the pulse of Rome, the world's beating heart of power and pleasure. Born in Cordoba, Spain, and raised in the capital, he climbed the ladder of politics through brilliance and eloquence. But brilliance attracts danger, and in the deadly games of the Roman Empire, virtue was never safe. He served under emperors who turned suspicion into sport. Eventually, he was exiled to Corsica, accused of adultery with the emperor's niece, a lie wrapped in politics. For 8 long years, he lived in isolation, surrounded by the vast, indifferent sea. But those years did not destroy him. They refined him. In exile, he found philosophy. In the loss of everything, he discovered the one treasure no ruler could touch: inner freedom. He wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Seneca came to see misfortune not as a curse, but as a teacher. He began to understand that life was not a chain of triumphs and failures, but a training ground for the soul. When Emperor Nero recalled him to Rome, Seneca returned not as a broken man, but as a philosopher tempered by solitude. He became Nero's tutor and, for a time, his moral compass. Under Seneca's guidance, the empire briefly flourished with fairness and restraint. But power intoxicates. The young emperor's reason dissolved under the weight of his own ego. Seneca watched helplessly as cruelty consumed the palace halls, as Nero became a tyrant. Imagine the agony of the philosopher, bound by duty, watching corruption bloom where wisdom once took root. He knew the limits of influence. He knew that philosophy could not tame a man who had surrendered to desire. Still, Seneca held to his principles. "You may constrain the body," he wrote, "but not the soul. The soul is free." Even within the poisonous air of Nero's court, Seneca remained untarnished. He lived among decadents, yet practiced moderation. He walked beside power, yet desired simplicity. He served the empire, yet served truth above all. But in Rome, virtue too easily becomes a threat. Rumors began to spread that Seneca had grown too rich, too wise, too respected. Nero's paranoia deepened, as fear always does when surrounded by flattery. Finally, Seneca asked to retire from public life, to spend his remaining years in quiet study. Nero agreed. But suspicion never truly sleeps. Years later, a conspiracy arose, a plot to assassinate Nero. Seneca, though innocent, was accused of being part of it. In the empire of fear, innocence is irrelevant. One morning, Nero's messenger arrived at Seneca's villa with a simple order. The emperor commanded his death. What does one think in that moment? Does the mind race with panic, with regret, with the desperate wish to live just a little longer? Or does it, as Seneca had so often taught others to do, stand still, unmoved by what cannot be changed? He greeted the messenger calmly, thanked him for delivering the emperor's command, and turned to his wife and friends, their faces pale with grief. He spoke softly, telling them not to weep. Every man, he said, owes a death to nature. He was merely paying his debt early. Fortune's way is uncertain, he reminded them, but death is certain. Why complain about the one thing that can free us from her? He opened his veins with composure, but his aging body, weakened by illness, was slow to release him. As he suffered, he continued to comfort his friends, reminding them that pain is brief and courage eternal. Finally, he asked to be carried to a warm bath. As his strength faded, he sprinkled water upon his attendants and said, "This is a libation to Jupiter the Liberator." Even as he died, he gave thanks for freedom. Seneca had always taught that the true measure of life is not its length but its virtue. And in that last act, his philosophy became more than words. It became reality. He had lived amidst power and temptation, yet remained master of himself. He had lost everything, yet kept his peace. He had been commanded to die, yet left the world unbroken. The Stoic endures what others run from. It is tempting centuries later to romanticize this death, to imagine it as serene, heroic, almost perfect. But Seneca was no marble statue. He was human. He felt fear. He felt sorrow. He felt the sting of betrayal and the ache of leaving life behind. His greatness lies not in feeling no pain, but in refusing to be ruled by it. Courage, he knew, was not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Wisdom was not withdrawal from life, but participation without attachment. Peace was not escape, but endurance. Seneca's writings still breathe with that paradoxical fire, calm and fierce at once. He teaches us that even in suffering, there can be purpose. Even in death, there can be dignity. And what of us, centuries later, living not in marble Rome, but in an age of noise, anxiety, and distraction? We may not face emperors, but we face fears that dominate us just as completely. Perhaps Seneca's lesson has never been more urgent. We run constantly from silence, from pain, from stillness. We numb ourselves with movement, with screens, with endless noise. But the Stoic endures what others run from. Seneca would tell us to stop running, to sit quietly with discomfort, to listen to our fears without being owned by them. No man is crushed by misfortune, he wrote, unless he has first been deceived by prosperity. The problem, he would say, is never our struggle, but our illusion that life should be easy. The Stoic prepares for hardship as a soldier prepares for battle, not with dread, but with readiness. He would tell us to practice dying every day, not morbidly, but mindfully. To remember that nothing truly belongs to us. Not our possessions, not our health, not even our loved ones. Everything we hold is borrowed from nature. And in recognizing that, we learn to love it more deeply because we no longer cling. Seneca's life was never about withdrawal. It was about engagement without losing oneself. He worked in politics, wrote tragedies, faced scandal, illness, and death, and yet remained inwardly free. His life was proof that Stoicism is not retreat, it is resistance. The Stoic endures what others run from because he knows there is nowhere to run. Pain, loss, uncertainty, they will always find us. To meet them calmly is to disarm them. Seneca's voice still whispers through time, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." We act as though time is endless, yet panic when it reminds us it is not. We postpone peace, waiting for life to quiet down. But peace is not found when the storm ends. It is found when we stand still inside it. You wait to There is an image that lingers, the philosopher in his final moments, surrounded by silence. The empire that once trembled before Nero has long since vanished. But Seneca's calm remains, steady as stone in the river of time. When life tests us, when betrayal, loss, or despair visit, we can remember him. Remember that composure is not ignorance, but understanding. That acceptance is not surrender, but harmony with the rhythm of nature. You are not in control of the world, he would say, but you are always in control of how you meet it. That is the essence of Stoicism. Stillness that cannot be stolen, strength that does not shout. Perhaps that is what the modern soul thirsts for most. Not more comfort, but more courage. Not more certainty, but more serenity. The Stoic endures what others run from because he sees beyond pain to principle, beyond fear to freedom, beyond death to truth. Seneca's final act was not tragedy, but triumph. Even stripped of all things, he remained whole. So when your world shakes, when loss arrives, when fear takes hold, remember the old philosopher in the dim Roman light, breathing calmly as his life ebbed away. He faced death not as an ending, but as completion. He knew what we are still learning, that the things we dread are not as powerful as our fear of them, that the only chains are those we choose to wear, and that freedom begins where fear ends. The Stoic endures what others run from, not because he is stronger, but because he understands. Pain is not the enemy. It is the fire that refines the soul. Fortune gives and takes without mercy, and the wise man thanks her for both. Death is not to be feared, but met with dignity, as the final act of a life well examined. When Seneca left this world, he left no monument of marble, only a legacy of thought, a whisper through the centuries that calm is not the absence of storms, but mastery within them. So let this be your reflection tonight. What are you running from? What truth, what silence, what pain, and what might happen if, instead of fleeing, you turn to face it with reason, acceptance, and grace? Perhaps then you would feel what Seneca felt in his final breath, a peace untouched by chaos. Because the Stoic endures what others run from, and in doing so, he discovers a strength that nothing in this world can destroy. Thank you for watching Stillness and Steel. If this story brought you calm or reflection, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more Stoic stories and timeless wisdom. Until next time, stay still and stay strong.